Gerald. So how can I hear from up? I'm here. So now I think we can start. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists. Welcome to this side event titled African Development Bank's Climate Change and Green Growth Strategic Framework, focused on supporting ecosystem restoration agenda in Africa. We are honored to have all of you with us today. My name is Kidano Averra. I am the Senior Climate Finance Officer at the African Development Bank, Climate Change Green Growth Department. I'll be moderating this session today. So this side event is organized by 3 organizations: the African Development Bank Group, which is the lead organizer, Global Green Growth Institution, GGI, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. I would like to introduce you with the agenda. We have 3 sets of agenda. The first segment includes opening remarks showcasing the African Development Bank's partnership with Finland and Global Green Growth Institutions. The second segment will focus on presentation and launching of the joint FDB and GGI Green Growth Readiness Assessment Report. And then finally, we'll have a question and answer session, as well as we will end with the closing remark. So this event is organized in a hybrid mode. Our presenter will be joining us from Qatar online, and we'll also have participants joining us online. You have the interpretation service. You can use the device near you. Channel 1 is for French. Channel 2 is for English. Let me first, before we start, let me take you through the agenda. First, we'll start with welcoming remarks from African Development Bank by Dr. Alhamdou Dorsuma, Acting Director of Climate Change Green Growth Department of African Development Bank. And then we'll have welcoming remarks from Global Green Growth Institutions by Dr. Male Fofana, who is a Director and Head of Programs in Africa for the GGI. And then we'll have a keynote speech on circular economy, presentation on the African Circular Economy Facility in boosting ecosystem restoration by Mr. Juha Savolainen, Deputy Director General of Development Policy, Department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. And then we'll have a few minutes to take a picture of our panelists, our distinguished panelists. And then we will deep dive into the report, which is on the African Green Growth Readiness Assessment Report, which is done by which is a joint project of the FDB and the GGI. So the presentation will be done by Dr. Pranab online from Qatar. Dr. Pranab is a country representative of Qatar office of the GGI. And then Dr. Alhamdou Dorsuma also will do the presentation. By the way, Dr. Alhamdou Dorsuma and Dr. Pranab are the lead author of this report. Finally, we'll have a question and answer session. We'll open the floor for a question, answer, and reflection. And then we'll finalize the session by closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, now allow me to give the floor to Dr. Dorsuma for his welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Kidanwa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming in this joint side event between FDB, the Global Green Growth Institute, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland. It is a great pleasure for me to address you today on the occasion of this COP15 on desertification. As you all know, this is a critical moment for the agenda of fighting desertification, land degradation, and drought in the world, but also in particular in Africa. I would like to acknowledge the work that the host country, Cote d'Ivoire, is doing on this agenda. Cote d'Ivoire is showing the way. We saw that 2 days ago with the launching of the Abidjan Legacy Program. For today, I would like to particularly thank our partners, our strategic partners, the Global Green Growth, for the work that we have been doing together over the last years on green growth. But also, I would like to thank our strategic partner, Finland, on an agenda that we launched recently, that's the circular economy. My brother, Joua, is going to speak about that later on. Colleagues, I want to mention that the greening of African economies presents many opportunities to address sustainable development. That's the reason why the African Development Bank has recently adopted an ambitious strategic framework on climate change and green growth, which include a high-level policy. This policy sets the vision for the bank in responding to climate change and promoting green growth over the next decade. We do also have a 10-year strategy on climate change and green growth, which is associated to that policy. The strategy is also providing us with critical areas of intervention, including adaptation, mitigation, climate finance, and also creating enabling environment for climate actions in Africa. And last but not least, one element of the framework is action plan. We have already implemented 2 action plans since 2011. These are 5-year action plans. And the second action plan has been completed last year. We are now embarking on a new action plan for the period 2021-2025 with ambitious objective to mobilize 25 billion as climate finance by 2025. So this framework is new. It is setting an ambitious agenda for the bank based on what we have already been doing. The bank has achieved a lot over the last years on climate change. Let me just give you some examples. Last year, we have been able to ensure that 92% of our projects are based on climate-informed design consideration, using tools like climate risk screening tools, greenhouse gas accounting tool, etc. We are able to make sure that our projects in several sectors are aligned with climate objectives. In addition, last year, we dedicated 41% of our annual investment as climate finance. This is very important because 5 years ago, we were at 9%. So moving from 9% to 41% last year was really a great achievement for us. And we want to build on that momentum to continue to be ambitious moving forward. We have also launched very important initiatives over the recent years. Let me give you an example. Last year during the Climate Adaptation Summit in January 2021, we initiated an ambitious program called Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, with a view to mobilizing 25 billion for adaptation across Africa by 2025. And this initiative is being implemented jointly with the Global Center on Adaptation. We are also championing and supporting other transformative initiatives, including the Great Green Wall for the Sahara and Sahel. The bank has committed to support this initiative with $6.5 billion by 2025. We are also championing an important initiative called the Desert to Power program, with the aim to generate solar energy in the Sahel, starting with the G5 Sahel countries, in order to provide solar energy to 250 million people. Let me now provide you with some insight on the very important assessment that we have conducted together with the Global Green Growth Institute. It has taken us more than 3 years to do that. This is an assessment called the Africa Green Growth Readiness Assessment, a joint study focusing on supporting the nationally determined contributions, the long-term strategies on climate change, and also the SDG agenda. This assessment is, as I said, a joint initiative with the Global Green Growth Institute, and we are going to launch officially the assessment today. The rationale behind this assessment is that while green growth offers many benefits, most countries are still lacking capacity, and their readiness to implement green growth is also very low. It is based on and also based on our respective mandates the Global Green Growth Institute, and the African Development Bank on supporting green growth implementation, we have decided to understand the readiness of African countries in implementing green growth. The two organizations have joined hands based on a partnership agreement signed in 2018 in order to do that among other activities. For us, investing in green growth in Africa is very important, but it requires both policy intervention, but also adequate financing. And also, we believe that we need innovative environmental solutions as well as clean technologies in order to achieve green growth. Let me now conclude here by stressing that investing in green growth will be part of our agenda moving forward by 2025. But in order to do that, we are going to build partnership with various institutions, including not only GGGI, who is already with us, but others that are interested in this area. Finally, linked to green growth, there is a concept of circular economy, which the bank has recently started to promote based on our strategic partnership with Finland, but also with the Nordic Development Fund. We have created a new facility on circular economy. We call it Africa Circular Economy Facility. The bank is also hosting the Africa Circular Economy Alliance. And these two instruments are going to help us champion circular economy in Africa. Let me stop here in thanking you again for joining us and pass the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsuma, for setting the tone for the session. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Male Fofana for the welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Dorsuma, for the introduction. It's quite interesting to hear that from IFDB, as well as Mr. Joa Sovalen, the Deputy Director General for the Policy Department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. As you recently see this IPCC report, they just states that the range of published evidence indicate that the next damage costs of climate change are likely to be significant and really increasing all over the world. Climate change is really threatening the livelihood of about 100 million of population in extreme poverty. And in sub-Saharan Africa, the GDP could be reduced by up to 3%, which is quite really big in a certain way. The need for green growth paradigm shift has never been more urgent, but also important for those countries. This new report, co-authored by Africa Development Bank and Global Green Growth Institute, has found evidence of growing political commitment to green growth in Africa is quite important. Data-driven decision-making is fundamental, especially associated to climate change-related issues. This report gave a large spectrum of opportunity and practical recommendations that will help African leaders to play a critical role of supporting green growth models. GGI is as intergovernmental organization dedicated in supporting and promoting strong, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth in developing countries and our member countries as well. As more countries recognize the benefit of green growth, more donors and governments are choosing GGI as a delivering partner. We have now more than 42 member countries and technical assistance programming also on green growth policy. Just recently last year, we mobilized close to $5 billion for our members countries. In Africa, we have 11 member countries. Then we support on working on different activities on the policy side, as well as on the green investment side. In our partnership working with African Development Bank and other development partner, we're trying to accelerate uptake and scaling up of green growth, model and economic development in Africa. We're trying really to demonstrate that the green growth models is a unique one and really quite important for those countries, especially in Africa, to make the change. And that change require, as Dorsuma mentioned, a lot of investment, but as well as good bankable project that can attract more funding. I think having this assessment that we did so far, that helped really to the country to know exactly where they stand with that, what are the area of improvement, and also how they can channel the money to have much more impact when it comes to public investment with blending finance. I think our partnership with the African Development Bank is very crucial for the continent and starts since 2018, as Dosima mentioned. We will continue really to strengthen this support for our member country and partner in Africa to pursue the green growth and inclusive economic growth in the perspective. We think also that in the time of like really supporting that changing related to the NDC as well as the SDGs, it's quite important that countries have the right information to make the right decisions. And our assessment in the report that we did really give practical tools, recommendations to help those countries to reduce the learning curve and also can be scaling up in a certain way. And we do things that is just the beginning of our collaboration and also type of data and report that we will publish and hope we will have more in the coming years that can be served as a basis for decision making for all these decision African leaders in Africa. So I will stop there and just say thank you again for this invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Fofana. Now let's hear the keynote speech on the Africa Circular Economy Facility in Boosting Ecosystem Restoration by Mr. Joa Savolainen.
Thank you, Chair, and honor to share the stage with Dr. Dorsuma and Dr. Fofana, and a particular thank you to Dr. Dorsuma and his team for taking us where we are today. We are really honored and happy to be a strategic partner of the bank on circular economy. I will divide my short remarks on 4 elements. First, a little bit on what is circular economy. Second, what has Finland done? Third, our partnership with the bank. And fourth, a little teaser on an important upcoming platform for experience sharing. First, with circular economy, we are really talking about an economic model that gets to the root causes of climate change and unsustainable use of natural resources. We are talking about a movement away from a linear economy where you have inputs, production, output, into a model where all output is also input into something else and there is no waste. So we're not talking about little tinkering here and there. We're talking about true transformational change. And there are various business models today that are already viable and producing profits for firms, but let me just name 3. Sharing platforms, where you extend the use life of a product by sharing, which can be very inexpensively and easily done these days by digital platforms. Number 2, product as a service, where you pay for the end result instead of owning a product. We can all imagine that we have something in the garage that most of the time that just stays there and it's idle value that should be put into use. Third, product life extension through updating, reselling, and reproduction. So these are all true today. That is circular economy. Now, Finland, we have set quite an ambitious target to be a carbon neutral circular economy by the year 2035. So that is 13 years from today. We are actually, I am saying this because we are well on our way there. We have set the indicators and set the motion. A key tool for us in this endeavor has been the establishment of a circular economy roadmap as the first country in the world back in 2016. We have actions on all levels in both public and private sectors, and we have tested numerous new solutions from food systems to built environment to municipal waste and rehabilitation of contaminated land. Then, very importantly, also education at all levels of learners on circular economy. We started it in schools, actually, primary schools. And Now, the government has taken circular economy to the core of its economic policy, and it sees it also as a very way for inclusive growth and quality jobs. In a way, we talk about climate resilience and resilience of livelihoods also. But what has been particularly interesting to see over the journey has been that in many ways, the markets, the consumers, the private sector has gone, is far ahead of the curve from us bureaucrats. They have taken the initiatives because consumers have preferences that are wildly changing in these days towards sustainability. Firms and the private sector is following, and us in the public sector, we find we are following. But this is perfect. And of course, digitalization has a key factor in this journey. Now, I mentioned the tools, the circular economy roadmap. We have been so excited about this and found it so useful that we have also made it available for free for our international partners. And I'm happy to share more information about this. But this in a nutshell about Finland. And what we are doing now with the bank, we are so happy that we have this partnership with the bank, which we feel is an ideal partner. The AFDB is a leader on green growth in Africa and has the ambitious goal of having 40% of the value of its operations in climate. And when I look at the bank's high fives, I find the circular economy well in line with all of it. You talk about climate smart agricultural systems, you talk about resilient infrastructure to adapt to climate change, low carbon energy use, remanufacturing and other resource efficient industries. And I have to say that we also admire the bank's vision on Africa's role globally in circular economy. The bank sees Africa having already a tradition in circular economy. Societies are collaborative, and this is in the core idea of the circular economy economic model, and facilitates Africa's leadership role in this. And of course, African youth have already demonstrated that they are very early adopters of technologies and innovation. So we feel that there is truly an opportunity for a leapfrog, and Africa can be a leader on circular economy globally. There are also already various applications which I think will help for fast tracking circular economy adaptation in Africa, starting from food waste for fertilizer, mass timber used for buildings recycled, electronic, plastic and clothes waste recycling. And what is also very important that all the remanufacturing, maintenance and fixing models, ways of business models are also very labor intensive and therefore create jobs for the youth. So I will now not go into the details of the facilities work, but there'll be work on 3 levels. First, it's a continent-wide program, so it's available to all the member states of the bank, the regional member states. There are work at 3 levels: institutional capacity building. Number 2, private sector support for startups and SMEs. And number 3, support for the African Circular Economy Alliance, the ASEA, which is a conglomeration of African governments for promoting the adaptation of circular economy. And so we hope that this will help outreach to the bank's regional member countries. And Finland is very glad to assist the bank's climate change and the green growth department with funding, with a technical expert whom I think is in the room here today, Elisa Luotonen. Would you like to just wave your hand? And we also have expertise from Finnish organizations on roadmaps and other useful circular economy tools. And we are, of course, also very happy to have as co-funders in this effort, the Nordic Development Bank. I close with just an infomercial. So Finland, apart from its national endeavors on circular economy, we also established 5 years back the World Circular Economy Forum for information and experience exchange on this very timely topic. The forum has henceforth become an annual gathering, a landmark event, and what is most important now is that the next World Circular Economy Forum will be held on the African continent in Rwanda toward the end of this year. And the news of the forum coming to the continent has been met very enthusiastically by the global circular economy community, and we are happy to have on board with us in organizing the forum the African Circular Economy Alliance and the African Development Bank. And we are very eager to see progress on this front together with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Savolainen. Now, before we go into the presentation, we'll have a photo session of the distinguished panelists. Sonia, could you please take the picture? Thank you. So thank you, Dr. Fofana and Mr. Savolainen. So you can go back, and then Dr. Suma, you can stay here with me because the presentation will start. Now, let's hear from Dr. Pranab from Qatar. I hope everything is set. Dr. Pranab, the virtual floor is yours.
Can you hear me well? Hello, can you hear me well? Can you hear me?
Can you increase the volume?
But how is it now? Hello. Can you hear me well? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me share my presentation. Sorry, just a moment. Okay, I guess now you can see my slides as well. Can you confirm? Okay, I think you are on mute. Okay, if you can hear me, let me start by thanking the organizers and our organizer and partner, African Development Bank, for giving the opportunity to present about this very important report. So what I'll do is that first I'll take you through the methodology that we adopted for this presentation. But before that, I want to also give some context to the issues that we are actually dealing with here. I think Dr. Male and Dr. Dorsuma has very rightly pointed out the challenges that we are facing right now in the continent. But actually, it's not only also in the continent, but it's I'll say at the global level. This report is actually a culmination of a partnership that we started in 2018. Here are some old photos, very good memories. And it took us some years to complete it because of various reasons, but here we are. And I am actually happy to present some of the results that you will actually see through this presentation. But I also encourage you to read through the report. It's quite a big one, a big, thick report, but I hope that it will be really helpful in context of the challenges that we are talking about. So first of all, I think we all know Africa. I do not have to here introduce again about the continent, but whenever I, introduce about the continent, I also introduce about this left-hand side of the picture. Africa is actually quite huge. As you can see, you can actually put all these big countries inside and still it will not be enough. So I am saying this because it is a country of huge, how can I say, potential in terms of abundance of natural resources, but also a vast renewable potential. But the challenges now is that it is also growing fast, and it has to grow fast. It has to develop because there are still millions of people under the poverty line. And to take these people out of the poverty, one of the key reasons, the key instrument is to, emphasis on economic growth until you come to a certain level of prosperity. And also, it is the youngest continent in the world, so it is growing at a fast rate, especially the sub-Saharan Africa, as you can see from these graphs. And this also, creates the challenges that with the great urbanization and the young population, I think you have to also create a lot of jobs, and then climate change is upon us with this impact. So I think with all these challenges, what is the best way actually that we can go forward? I think when you talk about climate change, the speakers have already elucidated on the climate risks that is upon Africa. It's not only in Africa, it's now everywhere in the world. I come from India, and you can see in the news now, I think India is one of the, worst affected from the heat waves that is going through, which is actually earlier than, normal heat wave season, and it will be actually longer. And I think this is already happening in many parts of Africa. We just do not hear in the news because news channels do not go there, many of them. But it is happening, and we can see it in the data as well. But here you can see some of the regions which will be worse, predicted to be worse affected, or will be affected, or being affected right now. So, but the interesting thing is that Africa was never the contributor, actually, the big contributor of climate change. Only maybe 2 to 3% of the global emissions is coming from the country. We actually look at 7 countries here, from Gabon, Kenya, Morocco, Mozambique, Rwanda, Senegal, and Tunisia. We focused on them while studying the continent. And as you can see here, the share of global emissions is actually less than 1% for all of them, 0.06, 0.02. So it's very low. And the CO2 emissions per GDP also actually is decreasing in many cases, although it's very low. So, and on top of that, we have now COVID-19, which is actually exacerbating some of the, challenges we have. But I think we should not lose the, focus on the ball. I think the biggest challenge is the climate change, because COVID-19 is also, as you can see, many studies are, indicating, is also kind of a result of some of the drivers that is also the same for climate change, such as deforestation or biodiversity loss. So I can put a lot of photos here from the flood in Mozambique or drought in Burkina Faso, but it will not be different in other parts of the world. Now, I think it's same. I think what I'm trying to say is that the challenges are actually not only, I think, unique to Africa, but I think the continent has some unique situations in terms of growing youth population, plus its vastness in terms of the land mass. And also, because it is endowed with so much resources, many of the actually economies are already kind of focusing on, growth that is through extraction of those resources. It's quite extractive industry focused. So that is not, of course, good for green growth or sustainability of the continent, and also not good for the world. because we cannot say that, okay, it's Africa's problem. No, it's a problem for everyone. So we know that now from the global warming, from COVID-19, everything is linked. So here are some of the drivers I have put together. You can see it's not like rocket science here. And what is actually climate change bringing to us? Climate change, as you know, even if we go through meeting the targets set out in the NDCs currently submitted, still it is predicted that the world will see around more than 3-degree rise in temperature. So it will be upon us. It is already upon us. So I think we have to think about adaptation, and especially for countries which are not well prepared or doesn't have the resources. When I talk about resources, I'm also trying to focusing on the economic resources. And the toll will be, I think, enormous. Already we're seeing it, especially on the human health, and more importantly on the food insecurity. Because in the continent, most of the agriculture on which 80 or 90% of the population depend on in terms of employment is rain-fed. So with the extreme changes in the weather or erratic weather or rainfall, this will be impacted, and it is already being impacted. And in terms of diseases, I think you have been already getting predictions that there will be more dangerous or more communicable or more, how can I say, more impactful diseases than COVID. And this will only rise with climate change. So I think I don't have to explain, or you don't have to actually discuss what will be the impact. So it's upon us, and it's about how we actually tackle this, or how we adapt in terms of this big challenge that is upon us. So we have heard about also the benefits of green growth. No need to go through it, but I just want to emphasize that I think green growth, when you talk about it, it's not about only like getting some knowledge from outside, from somewhere where it's advancing in a much better way. I think we have to look at also local knowledge, and we have to see how we can actually employ or engage the youth power, especially in case of Africa, and also the renewable resource that is out there. So I think the key word is the local, how to actually do the local innovation to extract this local knowledge that is already out there for in terms of living sustainably, and like use the power of youth and the renewable energy or renewable resources. So in our study, to actually understand what is the state of readiness, we decided that we first also need to know what is the current state and what's the current trend of the development in the continent and the green growth. So we also looked at those areas in different, dimensions through some indicators. And then we try to, come up with a framework to say that I think these are the areas that we have to look at when you talk about green growth readiness. And we have to look at this readiness in the context of meeting the Paris climate goal, in the context of the sustainable development indicators, especially poverty reduction, and also in terms of context of, contributing to the mitigation of climate change in the longer term. So long-term low emissions development strategies. And based on these, we try to provide some recommendations how the countries can actually pursue, or which areas they should focus on in terms of scaling up green growth. Now, this study is not a comparison between the countries, even if we have 7 countries that we focused on. It's about actually bringing the good experiences that we are seeing in the countries, and also highlight some of the common challenges and opportunities and best practices. So it's a kind of also a learning exercise for the 2 entities to know how we should approach green growth when you are talking about all these different, terms and goals, NDCs, SDCs, and LTLEDs, and how we can actually have a more comprehensive integrated view without making it too complicated. So the assessment scope focused on 7 countries, although first of all, we looked at the entire continent with some indicators and in our approach, but we also try to focus on 7 countries, and we choose the 7 countries after some discussion between the research team in the 2 entities, and we selected these countries, as you can see, to represent the 5 major regions in the continent. and they actually consist of different growth states. For example, you'll see Morocco and Tunisia probably in a going up in a higher stage in the development ladder when you talk about HDI, Human Development Index, whereas some other countries are a little bit lagging behind. Gabon or Morocco, maybe it's a higher GDP, whereas Kenya and Rwanda is still trying to catch up. So we have a good mix of countries that is represented through these 7 countries. Good mix of range of continents we try to represent through these seven countries. And the approach that we took is that, of course, first we try to identify the objective, why we are doing this, but we come up with a common framework to assess. And the main approach has been the use of indicators, basically data-driven. But at the same time, we also try to get feedback from the stakeholders, because some of the indicators are basically state, or they are not really kind of the drivers. They are like how can I say, what happened after different drivers actually created situation. So we needed to also get insights from the stakeholders who knows their local conditions and the countries better. So data collection was done at the country level, but also through Dex research, and also from feedback from stakeholder consultation that we held in Kigali, and also through interviews in the countries that we focused on, and then we actually came up with the analysis and recommendations. And to disseminate the finding, various medium has been used so far. It has been actually presented in 2 COPs. So as you know, it took 3 years for us. And also we have been using some of the findings for our own work, how we can actually improve our programming, especially in GGTI and AFDB. So what is really green growth readiness? So you can see here the 9 categories that we have come up with. So these categories we think are very important. I think first one is political commitment, because without it you cannot achieve much, and you cannot without the leadership you cannot actually make transformational change. But then only with political commitment you cannot make change. You have to also build up institutions and have the governance structure. You have to make right policies. But sometimes there are a lot of policies, but then how actually make it happen on the ground? That's where you need the regulatory changes. Of course, financing has to be there, but budgeting structure also has to be changed. And if you do not have sectoral plans or roadmaps in place, these policies cannot be implemented. But at the lowest level, which is very important, although we said operational readiness, it doesn't mean that it's less important than strategic readiness. You need the human capacity. You have to train people to actually, realize those plans or projects on the ground. And then you need to also innovate. Have to have local innovation, and for that, you need to also support research and development at different levels. And last but not the least, this is actually becoming very, very important. You have to have the right data and monitoring systems in place, because this is also important in terms of attracting financing, especially from international sources for developing countries. If you cannot show what you have achieved or how you are going to achieve it, so of course financiers are not going to come. So I think you need to have the monitoring systems in place, and also report in a way that are understandable or standardized according to the global frameworks. So I think MRV is also, that's why monitoring, reporting, and verification systems are also one of the very key components in this operational readiness. So I'll not go into detail in each of these and why we have selected these. So I urge you to go into the report and read. And if you have any feedback, of course, we are happy to always hear your feedback. So in terms of state and trend, so I think most of the analysis focuses on only the green growth indicator or green economy indicator. But when we talk about state and trend of green growth in, how can I say, Africa, we cannot talk about green growth if we not talk about climate change vulnerability, because any green growth plan has to start from focusing on adaptation, and you cannot plan for adaptation if you do not know how much vulnerable you are. So I think that's why we said we should have also indicators about how much vulnerable a particular country is. I mean, these indicators are mainly to highlight the vulnerability at the national level, but I think we would like to have this vulnerability assessed actually more at the local level, more granular data, to have more concrete, robust adaptation plan. At the same time, you cannot talk about transitioning to the green growth or any growth, having any growth, if you do not have basic socioeconomic development enablers in place. For example, if you do not have good health systems or education systems in place, or if you do not have other enablers in place, you cannot talk about growth. So we also looked at this climate change variability and socioeconomic development indicators, along with some transition indicators that are related specifically to the green economy to assess the state and trend. So here is a snapshot of all these indicators. As you can see, we have covered on the social side, health, education, women participation, and overall HCI. On the economic side, agriculture, which is very important for Africa in terms of its real development, infrastructure as a big enabling, plus also governance. If you have not good governance, corruptions, and non-transparency, then of course it cannot enable good growth. Then on the green transition side indicators, greenhouse gas emission is there as a state indicator, but then we looked at also sustainable consumption and equity indicators. And then energy is very, very important. So we separated it to access and then mix. So mix is more about the greener energy share, but the access is also very important because in Africa, there are still countries lagging in energy access. And then we have water and sanitation and economic ecosystem diversity and ecosystem indicators. So I will not go through them in detail, but one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that when we selected these indicators, we focused on only the indicators where we can find data and which are aligned to the SDGs, so that we can actually, say that by looking at it, we are also promoting or looking at the overall SDG agenda from a green growth, green economy lens. So just to highlight some of the results from the green transition indicators. So one, I think, indicator very interesting is that you'll see, I think, looking at the, green economy indicators. So one indicator is called biocapacity. So how much actually the country has the capacity in terms of supporting different ecosystem services or land for, different, for example, absorbing the waste that is producing or the land for various activities. And that is a kind of very overarching indicator that is used by organizations. And we found that the biocapacity is actually decreasing in many countries. I mean, even if you have high biocapacity, but if you have high ecological footprint, then of course you will exceed that capacity and you will be in a deficit. So which is the case in many countries that we are seeing. And that is happening because even if you have good biocapacity, but your population is increasing and people are using more resources per capita, then even this huge biocapacity would not be enough. So that means either you have to have reduced population or reduce the footprint. Reducing population is a very sensitive issue and you don't want to go for it, of course, from the policymaker's perspective. So of course, then you have to focus on how to reduce your ecological footprint. So I think one of the easiest step for increasing biocapacity is to protect the current, forest or wetlands or those, natural reserves that you have. That's the kind of first order, how can I say, action, and then expand it if you can. So I think protecting what you have is so much important. I think when you grow, we do not value what you already have, but when you lose it, you realize that actually, bringing it back is much more difficult than, protecting what you already have. Then another indicator, I think one indicator that I want to highlight is that on the emission side, that Africa's emissions are still low, as I have indicated, and as you probably know, it's rising and it's increasing because population is increasing fast. Even if per capita emissions is low, it's urbanizing fast and its population is increasing. So overall, I think at the end, even if we do not focus on mitigation now, at some point we have to start, like working on mitigation as well in terms of contribution from the continent. And then once the electricity access increases, if you do not focus on giving electricity access using renewable means, of course, the emissions will increase. Now, off-grid renewable power is a very, I think, viable means for providing the universal energy access. But I feel that although there is a lot of emphasis going on the off-grid renewable power, I think there could be more, because off-grid renewable power actually provide as a really good complementary role in terms of meeting the energy access. Although many countries are trying to focus still on expanding the on-grid energy access, because the continent is vast. In countries like Mozambique, if you want to expand through the on-grid energy access, I think per connection could cost around $2,000 US, whereas for off-grid, you can provide electricity with $200 to $400 US per connection. So in terms of cost, also it saves a lot, and also it also increases the resiliency. So I think countries could incorporate this as a serious plan for expanding their energy access or the electrification plan. So I think this is quite kind of a well-known topic, but I wanted to emphasize once more. In terms of women's participation, this is a very key issue, participation of women and youth. But we also found that there is not always a direct link between literacy rate of women between 15 to 24 hours is to the women's participation. It's also, I mean, the culture also plays a big part. So we have to, I think, focus on the areas of culture as well when you talk about women's participation, how to increase women's participation. For example, in Morocco and Tunisia, the literacy rate is very high for women, whereas women participation is much lower when you compare to Mozambique, where it's even much higher than actually male, even if the literacy rate is not high for women. So I think it's especially coming from the cultural factors, but this is something I think when you look at continent level, policymakers have to, I think, look at. And another area that is very, very important, I think people know more about it or can understand more about it after the COVID-19 pandemic, is the access of internet. I think, which is still low in most of these countries, but I think this can really spur innovation among youth, and this can actually, really spur the impetus for green growth, because most of the solutions right now, even on the off-grid sector, you'll see is underpinned by mobile internet or mobile telecommunications, even pay-as-you-go systems. So I think having internet access, even the basic ones, and giving access to the wider population can actually spur a lot of changes. And these changes doesn't have to be top down; it can come to the bottom up, and through innovation. So this is an area I think, of course, it's obvious, but I wanted to highlight here as a big enabler for green growth. So in terms of good practices, there are a lot of good practices we found. I do not want to elaborate all of them, but just here very briefly touch upon. For example, in Gabon, under the Emergent Gabon Strategic Plan, Gabon has actually is giving quite a lot of impetus to the wood processing sector. They're putting them in the special economic zone, giving them different incentives, which is actually reducing also deforestation, the pressure on deforestation or logging, illegal logging. So this is kind of very interesting, some, good practices that we found is coming up in some of the countries that other countries and also can follow. So Kenya is a good example of interagency coordination, which is very, very important. If you're talking about green growth, all the ministries have to coordinate because it's a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary, like challenge. So I think only one agency or one country cannot solve it. So having that interagency coordination is super important. And you can see that happening in the Kenya actually with the mandate directly coming from the president's office, so which helps a lot. In terms of Rwanda, one of the things that we found, which actually GGGI helped, like set up, is the FONERA Climate Fund. So this is a very classic example how you can support green growth by having a, central financing entity where all the funds coming from developing partners or even from national sources can be pooled, and with some definite set criteria that the agency developed, it can be dispersed to the right projects to promote green growth, right from the renewable energy to climate smart agriculture, and actually support creation of jobs in the rural areas. Morocco there's a good example in terms of how capacity development can be pursued at the multi-sectoral, multi-level, and they have a initiative called Force Maroc, where capacity development has actually been embedded, climate change capacity development in all their initiatives. So this is a very, very comprehensive initiative. I think we cannot just describe here in 2 minutes, but I really urge you to look at it in the report. And in Mozambique, we also see climate finance coordination, the Ministry of Economy and Finance taking kind of an oversight of the overall mitigation and adaptation related funds. And also they have developed what we call the Forestry Investment Fund, which is going to actually focus on the forestry monitoring, MRV, but not only MRV, but also investment in the forestry sector. So which is actually quite unique in my opinion. So I think I keep going on, but just to finish off, another innovative initiative in Tunisia, I think many of you know, it's called ProSol, which have actually drastically been able to increase the uptake of solar water heater systems in Tunisia. So when this program started, actually within first 1 or 2 years, there was actually 80% increase, year-on increase in the uptake. And now this has gone to the phase 3 and still continuing. I think they are also expanding to other technologies. But this is a very classic example how private sector and government has worked together to actually incentivize the uptake of certain technologies. It is very focused on the technology rather than also sector, but it's an amazing example. I think also good learning for many countries. So I think I'll stop there, and then I will give the floor to Mr. Dorsuma to actually touch upon some of the gaps that we have identified through our study, and also the recommendations that we are putting forward. So thank you very much, and Mr. Dorsuma, so the floor is yours.
Pranab, for this brilliant presentation. I'm going to quickly speak about the key findings. I'm not going to take much time. First, I want to highlight the areas where we have seen progress in those countries. In several countries like Rwanda, Kenya, and Morocco, we saw a lot of high-level political commitments to green growth, which is a good sign. And also we saw that some countries have put focus on national climate change and green growth strategies that they have developed. For instance, the Green Gabon Plan and also the Morocco Green Plan, as well as the Emergent Senegal Plan. We have also observed some emergence of financing readiness with regards to the green growth, the Green Climate Fund, and also with regards to direct access modalities. We also discovered that African NDCs and the new long-term strategies are yet to be translated into the costed investment plans that are required to attract private sector financing. As mentioned by Pranab, inter-agency coordination mechanisms are also being established. He mentioned the case of Kenya. We also saw some recent introduction of green growth curriculum in some African countries. But despite the progress, there are gaps. Gaps include limited policy and planning framework, weak monitoring and reporting systems in most of the countries, low stakeholder buy-in into the green growth agenda because green growth is not well known yet. There is also absence of dedicated and consistent financing mechanisms, especially for supporting NDCs and SDGs. We have also found that there is a limited cross-sectoral coordination, except those countries like Kenya. Lack of regulation, legal incentive frameworks for implementing the NDCs is also another important gap that we have seen. Another gap is that private sector is yet to be involved from the start of the planning process. The COVID-19 pandemic has even underlined the unsustainability and inequalities inherent in current economic and social systems. But the COVID has also created an opportunity to promote green growth recovery and rethink our systems in order to generate a paradigm shift towards more sustainable development. The availability of measures of measurement, especially MRV systems for planning and tracking NDC, LTS, and SDG implementation is also very limited in African countries. Next slide. Some recommendations. While overarching strategies and policies are being formulated in the countries, in many cases, operationalization and implementation needs to get some greater emphasis, especially in terms of reserve allocation and mobilization. Budgeting systems would need to be aligned for joined up implementation of SDGs and NDCs. As you may know, those two processes are being handled separately. NDCs sometimes fall under the ministries of environment, and SDGs fall under either the Ministry of Finance or Planning. There is a need of consistency across the budgeting system in order to allocate the necessary resources for the joint implementation of those two agendas. Many times there is also disconnect between the legal regulatory framework and the incentives and aspirations and goals that have been mentioned in the national strategies on green growth. Next slide. So in terms of recommendation on the political vision and commitment, we want to recommend that there is a need to ensure a continued political commitment for green growth at the highest level possible of the government, including from the presidencies of the countries. And we have seen that already happening. Need to increase green growth awareness at all levels of government, at the local communities level, as well as at the level of the private sector. At institutional level, there is a need to create a coherent policy environment that facilitates coordination mechanisms among the key ministries involved in green growth. We need to strengthen capacity on horizontal and vertical coordination. We also need to ensure that the implementation of green growth strategies are really mainstreamed into the national development plans. On the sectoral level, there is a need to improve the sectoral plans in sectors with green growth potentials, such as climate smart agriculture, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. Next slide. I think finally on the legal side, we need a robust legal and regulatory framework to facilitate the introduction and adoption of green growth technologies, as well as ensuring the enforcement of existing legislations and standards. On the financing side, we recommend that we put some emphasis on access to finance for green growth, in particular from domestic resources. As you may know, generally, there is no dedicated finance for green growth. We have financing instruments for climate change, but no financing dedicated to green growth. Need to strengthen also existing national climate funds. We have seen the case of Rwanda. There are many countries that are already establishing such funds. So we need to ensure that countries are ready to access climate finance and mobilize domestic resources from also national budget as well as private sector to finance green growth. Research and development, we need to provide incentives to use local and indigenous knowledge that also needs to be scaled up. We need to promote intra-Africa exchange and South-South-North triangular cooperation on green growth to learn from what is happening elsewhere in the world. Human capacity, we need to assess and plan for skills required in medium to longer term to harness green growth opportunities, and also mainstream green growth in formal education systems. Finally, on monitoring and reporting, we need to establish strong MRV systems to monitor and track green growth progress at country level. And we also need to fill the gap in terms of data in order to facilitate reporting of green growth progress at different levels. I think that's the last slide, and I thank you for your attention. We are going to open up for discussions on this presentation. And sorry for the long presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dorsuma. Thank you, Dr. Pranab, for this very comprehensive presentation. Now I think we've heard a lot about the readiness, some gaps, and also good practices, as well as recommendations on the green growth in Africa in general, and particularly in those selected 7 countries. Now we open the floor for question and answer reflection sessions. As Dr. Dorsuma said at his welcoming speech, he says we are open for partnership, for new partnership. We would like to do this strategic framework implementation with the wider stakeholders. So this is your chance if there is any idea for the new partnership. And also from Dr. Pranab, he also would like to hear any feedback on the report. So the floor is yours for any reflection and questions.
Thank you, actually, Director, for this good presentation, and thanks for my colleague from GGI and the Finland government. Actually, this session will help us to move from declaration to implementation, which is important. To move from talking to work, which is important for Africa. I have carefully followed you, but we can add something about SCBI, Scientific Political Evidence, or Scientific Political Interface, because you have mentioned about good expression, which I like it, about political will. How can the president will know, or the Minister of Finance, he has to know about the importance of this war, because their priorities could be different, about defense, about something else. But if we could have this scientific political interface to provide for them a scientific evidence base, this will help them to think and to allocate some domestic resources for this work. This is first. Second, I think we do need about early warning system attached with early action system. Not just early warning system, it has to be attached with early action system. This is important for us in Africa. The third one, we need, I can say, within and among member state coordination, strong coordination. Actually, there was just a short discussion between me and the acting director about the drought issues. And I think he has a lot of experience in that in different organizations. But actually, we have many initiatives in Africa and in all over the world. But we are missing the coordination. Even for the partners, we are missing the coordination. We are put some money here and there, but where is the coordination to have a comprehensive impact for the climate change and the green growth in African member states? Just a kind of comment, my office, by the way, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Ahmed El-Mekas. I'm the head of the African Union Specialized Technical Office for Agriculture Research and Development. And we have done some work even, and this is what I'm talking about, coordination. You know, we have even in our level, I'm talking about my office, just my office is a small part from the African Union. We have developed the irrigation framework. African Irrigation Framework, which has been endorsed by the Executive Council of the African Union, all the member states, the 55 African member states. We have developed something about managing the conflicts between farmers and pastoralists, which all of this is related to climate change. So if we can't come in complementary ways to work together, it will be appreciated for all of us. Once again, I have to thank you, Acting Director, for this good job, and to thank all the panelists and thank our colleagues from the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I could just comment a little bit about what the honorable gentleman from AU mentioned, the importance of budgets. I don't think there is no heavier tool that a government can have to make change happen than budgets, finance ministers. We have also realized the importance of this, and climate budgeting is an important tool. There is a like-minded coalition of finance ministers emerging in the world, and there is actually an open coalition called the Finance Ministers Climate Coalition, which is an open dialogue for sharing information between these central ministries in each country for impacting change on ways and means of better budgeting and taking climate matters into consideration, and happy to also share more information about that to anybody who's interested. It's co-established by Finland and Chile, and I think the chairmanship is next going over to Indonesia, if I remember correctly. Thank you.
Do we have any other question or reflection?
Just one question to maybe Dorsuma. I would like to hear more. And I know also he already had a reflection on that. So we have that readiness green growth assessment coming from those example of country. Now, how we can link that result with attracting more investment, mostly on blending finance, to help those countries to achieve this area or gap they also seen from this report, or how we can use that as scaling up a certain way. Just the link between this report and blending finance and your perspective.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Pranab, would you like to take the first question?
Sorry, the first question from Malay.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, did you mean the first question from Malay?
From the African Union.
Okay, I think so. There are actually a few points that were highlighted in that intervention. Very nice intervention, but I'd like to only focus on the coordination aspects. I think how can I say? I will not say lack of coordination, but not enough coordination is not a kind of a challenge that is also unique to like one region or one country. Here I am, Qatar, working with the government, and this is also like a same challenge. Basically, there is lack of coordination between the ministries here, and that is a big impediment, I'll say, to actually advance the agenda of green growth. So I think from our perspective, and that's why the institutions like or entities like DGDI is there. I think Malay also is there, our director in Africa, who can probably attest to what I'm saying, or say if I'm wrong, is that I think in DGDI, I think that we took it as one of our mandates to actually, like enhance coordination between ministries, so that they can also share information and like advance the green growth agenda, be it in terms of developing policies or in terms of like mobilizing investments. So whenever we also pursue any policy, that's why we try to emphasize that all of the stakeholders or all the ministries are consulted and they are on board before we actually go forward. Because without that, you cannot really advance the green growth agenda. So I think also I would say that to advance coordination, I think we have to take a proactive role. So especially the organizations like DGGI, because I think we are like in the ground who actually sees the bigger picture and who can actually connect with all the stakeholders. Because ministries are busy in their own work, and other entities are also can be really focused on certain agenda. But we know that we need to bring in all the stakeholders. So I think this is our mandate for the organizations like us, and I think we should be also given more encouragement, I will say, from the other stakeholders that we do this kind of coordination when we do our work. So I think I'll stop my intervention there.
We would like to say a few more on the first question and also on the question.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Pranab, for the responses provided to the first questions. Let me pick the one on political commitment and also the link between evidence, scientific evidence-based knowledge and political commitment and policy action also. This has also been mentioned in the report, but we realize that political commitment is already there in many countries, not all, but in those that we observe political commitment, it was because in those countries there was some work in mentioning, in making sure that the politicians are aware of the issues. So there is a work done by scientists in those countries in order to show the impacts of climate change in the countries, as well as the opportunities that exist for politicians to take action. So there is a need to bridge the gap between policy, research, and policy action. And this, I agree with you, it's already happening, but we need to do more on that side, making sure that policy makers and also scientists, they speak the same language, because sometimes, you know, scientific evidence is not easy to be translated into policy action. So there is some work to be done at that level in order to translate scientific evidence into policy-driven action. Let me now address the important question raised by my friend Mali. Actually, when we did the report, it was to shed some light on what are the challenges that countries are facing in implementing green growth. What are the opportunities? And we were really interested in identifying opportunities for financing. You know, this assessment has also helped us a lot at the African Development Bank when we did a recent assessment, independent assessment on our climate change and green growth agenda. And the assessment revealed that we at the African Development Bank have been focusing more on climate financing. We have not been prioritizing green growth financing. And so currently there is some work going on at the bank in order to identify opportunities to also finance green growth, because, you know, green growth is much a bigger agenda than climate change or climate finance. So this is something that is going on. And also we see that assessment as a tool for reserve mobilization, because we saw the examples that the Pranab has shown in Rwanda or in Mozambique. There are financing instruments, national financing instruments that are being created to mobilize domestic resources to finance green growth at country level, which is promising. Now, how can we help countries, more countries do the same, or help those that are already creating those mechanisms in order to access more resources? So I think there is something that is being done. We need to scale it up. We need to make sure that other countries also do the same. And we also at the level of our institutions, I know there are recommendations for DGGI, for FDB. We need to really foster coordination and collaboration among us in order to use those opportunities that we have identified, translate them into bankable investments, and go to our partners and mobilize resources for those countries that have already identified those bankable investments. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we are coming to end of this session. Dr. Dorsuma, would you like to say a few words as a closing remarks? Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this report is available online in both languages, French and English. You have the QR code and also the link at the bottom of the agenda where you can find the report. And then if you have any additional feedback, you can always reach the authors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank you all participants for making time out of your busy schedules to attend this important side event. For me and for my colleagues, it has been an engaging and thought-provoking session. We would like to also thank Dr. Male for his opening remarks, Jua for his keynote presentation, and Pranab for his brilliant presentation on the report that we did together, and also for its expert insight on those issues. We also had brilliant moderation throughout the session from Kidanwa. Thank you for that. And also thanks to colleagues who have been working very hard to put that session together. Let me also say that the overarching theme of that session and what I take away from it is that there is a sense of optimism and opportunity that green investments present across many sectors in Africa, particularly for biodiversity conservation and also nature-based solution in order to transition Africa to green growth. During the couple of hours, we have also talked about entry points and the opportunities that climate action and green growth present for the Africa's development. It is my hope that this discussion that we had today and others like that will serve as a call to accelerate climate, green growth agenda in the continent. As mentioned during the opening session, green growth does not only present profitable investment opportunities, but it also helps to protect nature, reduce desertification, land degradation, and protect investments from the devastating impacts of climate change. I will leave you with this thought, and I look forward to working with you all to accelerating climate action and green growth on the continent. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.